The only reason I heard what I heard was because of a dead raccoon. We'd been having issues with the smell in the attic, like something had crawled up there and died. So I came home from work early that day, hoping to catch the pest guy before he left. He was late, as usual, and I had nothing to do but wait. I sat in the spare room upstairs, the one we never used, the one with the broken ceiling fan and those old college boxes she refused to throw away. I had the door cracked open for some air. That's when she walked in. Not into the room, into the hallway. My wife. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and her voice was soft. Not secretive, not suspicious, just unfiltered. I don't know how much longer I can do this, Britt. Every morning I wake up and wonder why I'm still pretending. I didn't move. I couldn't. It was like my spine turned to cement. He's not a bad man. He's just nothing to me. He tries so hard to be good, and it makes me feel awful, like I'm the villain in some movie. But I can't fake it forever. I don't love him. I never did. I just didn't want to end up alone. I should have made a sound, slammed a door, coughed, anything to stop it. But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, while my wife told her sister that I was a placeholder for the man she never met. Later that night, she made dinner like everything was fine. Lasagna, garlic bread, extra cheese, my favorite. She even wore the blue sweater I bought her last Christmas. She had no idea I knew, and I didn't tell her. Not that night. Not for a long time. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I confront her? Because I wasn't ready to hear her say it twice. Our marriage didn't explode. It dissolved. Slowly. Quietly. The way paper dissolves in water. No noise, just weakness. I filed for divorce 6 weeks later. No fight. No tears. She just blinked and said, "Okay." I moved out 2 days before our 10th anniversary. But here's the part no one tells you. Divorce isn't the end. It's a beginning. Of what, you ask? Well, 3 years later, she showed up at my office, wearing the same blue sweater. And what she told me, it rewired everything I thought I knew. 3 years had passed. Enough time, I thought, to rebuild, to forget, to delete every version of her that had ever lived in my mind. I'd moved into a quiet condo above a wine shop, traded weekend brunches for solo breakfasts with burnt toast, and eventually stopped hoping I'd get a random text from her. That hope was the last thing I killed. It was a Tuesday, dull, rainy, gray, like the world forgot to wake up properly. I was reviewing some equipment orders in my cramped office at the logistics warehouse I managed. Nothing glamorous, but it kept the lights on and my mind busy. Then my receptionist buzzed in. "Hey, Halden. There's someone here asking for you." "Client?" I asked, already bracing for a shipping complaint. "Not exactly. She says she's your wife." I froze. I stared at the wall like it had answers. My heart didn't pound, it stalled. I walked out front, and there she was, Tessa, standing just inside the glass doors, soaking wet from the rain. Hair darker now. No makeup. Just the blue sweater. The one I hadn't seen since the day I moved out. It still had that tiny snag near the shoulder seam. I remember that detail vividly, because I caused it. We were laughing that night, and I accidentally tore it while pulling her into me. She didn't get mad. She kissed me. That was back when we still touched each other without thinking. She looked up, and the moment our eyes met, she gave this half-smile. Not confident, not flirtatious, just broken. And I hated how badly I still recognized her pain. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice low, almost childlike. Somewhere private. I should have said no. I should have walked away. I'd built myself back up after she dismantled me, brick by brick. But my mouth betrayed me. Yeah. We went to the back of the warehouse, to a dusty little break room that smelled like burnt coffee and old cardboard. I watched her hands as she sat across from me. No ring. Just pale fingers twitching in her lap. She didn't start with an apology. Not even small talk. Instead, she asked, "Do you remember that day in the attic? The one with the dead raccoon?" I blinked. How could I forget? She nodded slowly, and for a second, I thought she'd start crying. But she didn't. "I knew you were there," she said. Those words hit me like a fist to the chest. "I saw your boots through the door crack," she continued. And I kept talking. I said those things because I thought maybe if I said them out loud, you'd finally leave me, and I wouldn't have to be the one to pull the trigger. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the oxygen had been vacuumed from the room. "You said you didn't love me," I whispered. "I didn't say the whole truth," she replied. "But you believed that part. And I let you." For a moment, All I heard was the hum of the vending machine beside us. I wanted to scream at her, ask why she let me drown alone in silence all those years ago. But I didn't. Because deep down, I wanted to know what she wasn't saying, the part that brought her back after all this time. Then she dropped the real bomb. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have said before we divorced. Something that might change how you remember everything." And before I could ask what it was, the door to the break room opened, and in walked someone I'd never seen before. But he looked exactly like me. He wasn't exactly me. Not in the way people mean when they say someone looks like you. No, this was more precise. His build, the slope of his nose, the small scar above his left brow, the one I got at 13 falling off a bike. He had that. His hair was shorter, his eyes more sunken, but I swear, it was like staring into a dimmed-out version of myself, like a copy that had been left in the sun too long. I stood up instinctively, the chair squeaking under me, and asked the only thing I could manage. "Who the hell is that?" Tessa didn't look surprised. In fact, she looked relieved, as if she'd been carrying a secret so heavy for so long that finally letting it out brought her a twisted kind of peace. "This is Nolan," she said. He's your brother." I blinked, laughed once, short and humorless. "I don't have a brother." "Yes," she said. "You do?" I looked at the man, Nolan, apparently, who hadn't said a word. He looked tired, haunted, like someone who'd lived 1,000 lives underground. His arms were crossed, but he didn't seem hostile, just empty, like he was watching himself from outside his own body. "What kind of sick?" I started, but she cut me off. "He was adopted out. Before you were born. Your parents never told you. He was raised in and out of homes. Institutions. He found me 2 years ago." I couldn't speak. My brain was trying to grasp the shape of this impossible thing. "He thought you were dead," she added quietly. "That's what he was told." I finally managed to sit back down, my hands trembling. "And you didn't think to mention this at any point during our 9 years together?" She shook her head, biting her lip. "I didn't know how. At first I didn't believe it myself. And when I did, I didn't want to break you. I thought maybe I could just pretend it wasn't real. That I could live 2 separate truths without them colliding." Now Nolan finally spoke. His voice was gravel, like someone who didn't use it often. "I didn't come here to ruin your life. I just needed to see you once. To know I wasn't imagining it. That there really was someone out there who got the life I never did." I stared at him. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to demand a DNA test, or call my mother, or tear holes in the ceiling until this all made sense. But something in me cracked instead, not from rage, from recognition. He was me, but not me, like an echo that never made it to the walls. "Why now?" I asked finally. "Why 3 years after she left me? Why now?" Tessa looked up with tears threatening her eyes. "Because he's dying." The room turned to ice. Nolan didn't flinch. 3 months, maybe 4. I swallowed hard, my mind spiraling in every direction. Grief, betrayal, confusion, a faint, sickening thread of guilt woven through it all. I'd hated Tessa for years, painted her as cold, selfish, emotionally vacant. But now she looked like someone who had been holding a grenade with the pin already gone, trying not to let it explode near me. And for the first time since the attic, I had no idea what to feel. Then Tessa looked me dead in the eye and said, "There's one more thing you don't know. One thing I've never told anyone. And after you hear it, you may never speak to me again." The silence after Tessa's last sentence was the kind you feel in your teeth. I didn't breathe. Nolan didn't blink. Even the hum of the vending machine in the break room seemed to fade. For a moment, all I could hear was the ticking of the cheap wall clock above her head, each tick like a match scratching against my nerves. She hesitated, looked down at her hands, then back at me. "The reason I said what I said on the phone that night, the reason I wanted you to leave me, wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I loved someone else." The floor dropped out from under me. I felt this dull pressure behind my eyes, like my brain had just yanked the emergency brake mid-thought. "You're saying you cheated?" I said, not asking, just naming it. But she shook her head slowly. "No, I didn't. But I almost did. Over and over again. I thought about it more than I thought about you. And that made me hate myself." Her voice cracked, and I could see it now. The guilt she had worn like invisible armor for years. She had never cried during our divorce. Not in court. Not during the move. But here, in a warehouse break room, surrounded by plastic chairs and the smell of burnt microwave popcorn. She looked like she might unravel completely. I met someone, she continued. Not in the way you're thinking. He was one of my patients. I blinked again. You're talking about Nolan? No, she whispered. Not Nolan. Someone else. Years ago. I couldn't keep up. My thoughts were splintering in every direction. He reminded me of you, she said. At first, that's all it was. He had your posture, your dry humor. It was like being haunted by the version of you I missed. The version before we got too comfortable. Before we stopped trying. I started looking forward to seeing him. Started dressing nicer on his appointment days. Laughing at things that weren't even funny. I felt sick. I didn't act on it. But I wanted to. And every time you brought me flowers, or made me breakfast, or kissed me on the shoulder like you always did, it made me feel like a monster. She paused, wiped her face with her sleeve, and then, just like that, she looked at Nolan. I told him everything, she said. He was the first person I ever said it out loud to. That I was in love with the idea of someone else. That I couldn't look you in the eye anymore without feeling like I was lying. That was when I realized Nolan didn't look surprised. He already knew. Of course he did. She had confided in him. The stranger with my face had become her vault, her secret keeper, her safe zone. And I had been outside the walls the entire time, clueless and trying to fix a marriage that was bleeding out behind my back. You let me think I was the reason you were unhappy, I said quietly. You let me carry that for years. I know, she replied. I hated myself for it. That's why I let you walk away. I thought I was doing the right thing, setting you free from someone who wasn't real anymore. But I wasn't brave enough to tell you the truth. I leaned back, stunned, furious, exhausted. I wanted to scream. I wanted to be numb. But I wasn't. Instead, I felt this cold, hollow clarity creeping in, like finding a hidden room in a house you've already sold. A room full of dust and broken things, too late to fix, too late to live in. And then Nolan stood up. There's something you both need to know, he said, because it changes everything. I turned to him, the man with my face, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted the truth. But he gave it to us anyway. I wasn't just in foster care, he said. I was in state custody. And I found something years ago, something that connects all three of us. Tessa's eyes widened. What are you talking about? I asked, already bracing for impact. He reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Our parents weren't who you think they were. And your entire life, it's built on a lie. He held it like it weighed 50 pounds. A plain, weathered envelope, yellowed edges, creased corners, the glue seal long, eroded. But the way Nolan stared at it, I could tell it wasn't the paper that carried weight. It was the memory. This was given to me by one of the counselors at the group home, he said. She wasn't supposed to. But I think she knew I was the only one who'd care. Tessa and I didn't move. He slid it across the table toward me, then sat back down slowly, like he'd just laid a loaded weapon between us. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over it. Something inside me wanted to walk out of that break room and never look back, to go back to thinking I was just a man with a bad marriage and an unlucky heart. But curiosity is cruel. It always wins. I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded hospital discharge form. Faded ink. Typed text. 2 names. One was Nolan's, born 5 years before me. The other wasn't mine. It wasn't even close. I stared at the birth certificate clipped to the back. Baby boy unnamed. Born at Pinebrook Medical Center. Mother, Judith Renner. Father, listed as unknown. My stomach flipped. This isn't right. My mother's name is Dana. Dana Holt. Nolan shook his head. No, Dana was your adoptive mother. She and her husband, the man you thought was your dad, they took you in as an infant. But they never finalized the paperwork. They paid a woman under the table. Changed your name. Raised you like nothing happened. I looked to Tessa, waiting for her to call him insane. To deny everything. But her face had gone pale, her hand covering her mouth. I heard the name Renner before, she whispered. Once. Your mother, Dana. She used to have this box in the closet labeled legal stuff. I was looking for insurance paperwork years ago and found a notarized document. I didn't understand it, but I remember that name. I stood up too fast. My legs were trembling. The break room swayed slightly, like the floor had shifted an inch out of place. No, that's impossible. I have baby photos. I have photos they gave you. Nolan interrupted. Staged ones. They took you in when you were 2 months old. You never knew anything else. And what? You expect me to believe you just happened to dig all this up? That you're some long-lost sibling with secret records and a tragic past? He reached into his coat again, this time pulling out a stack of copies. Court documents, foster records, names, dates, his life on paper, crammed into manila folders and black and white ink. And then one thing stood out, a social services form from 1987, signed by Judith Renner. A single note scrawled in blue pen. Both boys placed separately. Do not inform adoptive families of blood relation. I sat back down, slowly, my hands shaking as I read it again and again. Both boys, I muttered. We're full brothers. Nolan nodded. Different fathers. Same mother. She was unstable. Addicted. The state stepped in. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Every holiday photo, every bedtime story, every stupid school project with my mom cheering from the bleachers, it all felt like a lie now. A performance. How much did she know? How much had she buried? And then Tessa finally spoke, her voice barely audible. I think I met her once. We both turned to her. In college, she said, eyes distant. She showed up outside our dorm building. She was asking for you, but she didn't know your name. She kept calling you Eli. I thought she was confused. Drunk. I told her no one by that name lived there. But now, I think that was your birth name. Eli. The name felt foreign, but not entirely wrong. Like an old song you almost remember the lyrics to. I felt a chill crawl across my back. And then Nolan looked at me differently. Like he wasn't angry anymore. Not jealous. Just sad. I didn't come to mess up your life, he said. I came because there's a piece of me I never got to know. And now I'm dying, and I thought maybe, just maybe, if you knew the truth, you'd want to know me. Just for a little while. Tessa turned away, wiping her eyes. I could tell she didn't expect any of this to come out. Not like this. Maybe she thought she was opening an old wound, but it turned out she'd been guarding a buried body. I looked at the envelope again, then at Nolan. My brother. My stranger. And then I said the words I didn't expect to say. Come with me. His eyebrows lifted. Where? I stood up again, steadier this time. We're going to my mother's house. Tonight. I want answers. And I don't care what she's been hiding. I'm done living in a story someone else wrote. The drive to my mother's house was colder than the air outside. I barely said a word the whole 40 minutes it took us to get there. Nolan sat in the passenger seat, watching the trees flick by in the dark, his fingers fidgeting with a thread on his jacket sleeve. Tessa followed in her car behind us. I didn't invite her, but she came anyway, like she couldn't look away from what she'd helped set in motion. I hadn't been to that house in over a year. I stopped visiting after our divorce. Not because she picked sides, she didn't. My mother never picked anything. She floated through life as if reality was a fog she could walk through untouched. But now, driving up that familiar driveway, everything looked different. Smaller, older, fragile, like a painting that had faded too far to fix. Her curtains were still blue. I don't know why that detail made my chest ache, but it did. I used to tease her about those curtains, said they looked like they belonged in a seaside motel. She'd laugh and say, well, I never got to live near the ocean, so this is my compromise. I used to think it was charming. Now it felt like camouflage, something cheerful to cover something rotten. She opened the door before we knocked, as if she'd been watching us from the front room. She wore that same knit cardigan she always did when she was nervous, the one with the mismatched buttons. Her hair had gone whiter than I remembered, and her smile was a full second too late. Halden, she said softly, before her eyes shifted to Nolan. She froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again. No sound. I didn't give her time to pretend. You recognize him, I said flatly. Her hands trembled slightly. You should come in. We followed her inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and something burnt. The furniture hadn't moved an inch in 20 years. Everything was just as I left it. Except now, it all felt counterfeit. Like a set. I didn't sit down. Neither did Nolan. I pulled the envelope from my coat and dropped it on the coffee table. Tell me the truth. My mother sat slowly, avoiding both our eyes. She reached for the envelope, then stopped. I was 19 when I met Judith, she began, voice shaking. She was my half-sister. Your biological mother. The words didn't register at first. It was like hearing my name spoken in a foreign language. She was sick, mentally, and there was no one else. The state took her first child, Nolan, after she was arrested during a psychotic episode. They told her she wasn't fit to raise any child. When she got pregnant again, she begged me not to let the system take her baby. She looked up at me then, and her eyes were glassy. That baby was you. I'm not your son, I asked, stunned at how hollow my voice sounded. You are, she whispered. You always were. I raised you. I loved you. But no, Halden, I didn't give birth to you. I forged the records. I erased Judith's name. I lied to protect you. Nolan took a step forward. And me? She looked at him, her lip quivering. I didn't know where you were. The state wouldn't say. They told Judith you'd been adopted, but I later found out you were shuffled between homes. By the time I pieced things together, it had been years. I didn't think I'd ever find you again. I didn't even know you remembered. Nolan's jaw clenched, and for the first time I saw the grief behind his quiet. The years of abandonment hardened into silence. I remembered everything, he said. The screaming, the cold beds, the letters they never let me send. I turned to my mother, heart pounding. You let me grow up next to his ghost, and never told me I had a brother? She covered her face with her hands. I was afraid. Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd hate me. That I'd lose the only good thing Judith ever gave the world. We stood there in that living room, the three of us, like broken statues in a house of lies. I didn't know who to be angry at. Her? Judith? The system? Myself? Finally, Nolan broke the silence. She's gone, isn't she? He asked. My mother nodded. Judith passed away 5 years ago. Liver failure. She died alone. Nolan said nothing. He just sat down in the old chair by the window and stared out, his reflection barely visible in the dark glass. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stood there, everything I ever knew peeling off me like wallpaper in a storm. And then Tessa walked in from the hallway. I had forgotten she was even there. There's one last thing you need to see, she said, her voice tight, almost mechanical. It's about Nolan. And it's going to change everything again. I looked at her, at the fear in her eyes. And for the first time in my life, I wished I had never come looking for answers. The room shifted when Tessa spoke. I mean that literally. It was like the air turned heavy, like all the oxygen got sucked out of the walls, and the old house groaned under the weight of what she was about to say. Nolan turned slowly to look at her. My mother blinked as if she wasn't sure Tessa had really spoken. I stared at my ex-wife, this woman who had dragged me through years of silence, confusion, and heartbreak. And now here she was, saying there was another secret? I had nothing left in me to brace for it. Tessa didn't speak right away. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small red folder, not thick, not bulky, but worn at the corners. She didn't hand it to me. She handed it to Nolan. He looked at it like she'd just passed him a piece of dynamite. Open it, she said quietly. Nolan hesitated, then flipped it open. For a moment, his face remained still, unreadable. Then his eyes moved faster, scanning line after line. I watched a slow horror begin to bloom across his face. Not the sudden kind that makes you gasp, but the kind that spreads like fire through dry grass. His fingers tightened on the folder's edge, and I thought he might tear it in half. Tessa, I said, my voice dangerously low, what is that? She looked at me now, and I saw the full weight of guilt she had carried for years. It's from the genetic clinic I visited 2 years ago, she said. After Nolan told me he was your brother. I blinked. You never told me you went to a clinic. Because I didn't go for me, she said. I went for both of you. I took a hairbrush from your old apartment, the one I still had, and I asked Nolan for a swab. I needed to know if it was true, if you were actually related. And I asked, we are, right? That's what all this has been about. Tessa's face broke, just cracked wide open like a dam giving way. No, she said. That's the thing. You're not. You're not brothers. You're not related at all. I laughed once, a sharp, dry sound. What are you talking about? We have the same birth mother. She nodded. Yes, but somewhere along the line, something happened. A switch. A falsified record. I don't know what exactly, but the test was definitive. You and Nolan don't share DNA. You're not blood. I looked to Nolan, who was staring at the folder like it had bitten him. He looked destroyed. But I started. She cut me off. There's more. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get in my car and drive straight into the night and never hear another word from anyone in that room. But some cursed part of me couldn't stop listening. 3 months before I asked for the divorce, Tessa said, voice trembling now, I found out I was pregnant. Everything around me stopped. I didn't tell you because I didn't plan to keep it, she continued, rushing now, like she had to get the words out before her courage collapsed. I didn't even know how I felt about you anymore. I'd already disconnected. I was confused, scared. I told myself it was a mistake, that I'd take care of it quietly, that I was sparing you pain. My throat was dry. You had an abortion and never told me? She shook her head. No, I didn't go through with it. I couldn't. But I also couldn't raise the child with you. I didn't think you were strong enough, emotionally. You were breaking apart, and I didn't trust you. Tears slipped down her face, but I felt nothing. Just cold. Just empty. So where's the child? I asked. My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. She looked down at the floor. With Nolan. The room fractured. I stared at her, stunned. You mean you and Nolan? She didn't nod. She didn't have to. Nolan finally spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. We didn't mean for it to happen. We were both broken. We were both looking for something. We didn't think it would last. I took a step back, nearly tripping over the edge of the rug. You had a child with the man you said was my brother, while we were still married, and never said a word. Tessa broke then. Her knees gave out, and she sat on the floor, sobbing into her hands. My mother stood, stunned, one hand over her mouth, eyes wide, like watching a tragedy she couldn't rewind. I'm sorry, Tessa whispered through her sobs. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. I looked at Nolan, this man who once felt like a strange reflection, now reduced to a hollow mistake in someone else's story. You came to me, I said, voice cracking, asking for brotherhood, for connection, for peace. And the entire time, you were the knife in my back. He didn't deny it. He didn't justify it. He just sat there, clutching that folder like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I turned toward the door, my legs numb, my vision blurry. I couldn't hear anything else. But just as my hand touched the doorknob, Tessa spoke one last time. Halden, the child, he thinks you're his father. The door creaked open in my hand, and I walked out into the night. It took me 3 weeks to call her again. I spent the first one drinking too much coffee and sleeping too little. The second one visiting my therapist every other day. And the third one walking. I walked through parks, down roads I hadn't been on since high school, past houses that used to feel like landmarks in a world that had now collapsed and rebuilt itself behind my back. I didn't know why I picked that Saturday. Maybe it was the weather, late spring, sun bleeding gently through the clouds, the kind of breeze that makes the world feel like it's trying to make up for something. I pulled into the park without thinking, half expecting to turn right back around. But then I saw them. Tessa, sitting on a bench. No makeup, no layers. Just her and a paper cup of coffee that she probably hadn't touched. Her eyes were locked on the swing set. And on it, a boy. 5, maybe 6. Small. Wild brown hair. A crooked little grin, like he was in on some cosmic joke no one else had figured out yet. He looked up when I walked closer. Stopped swinging. And then he ran straight toward me. Tessa stood slowly, but didn't move forward. She let it happen. Hi. The boy said, panting, eyes wide. Are you Mr. Halden? I crouched down, trying not to shake. Yeah, I am. I drew you a picture, he said, digging in his hoodie pocket. Mom said you used to be her best friend. My heart broke in a dozen new ways I didn't know existed. He handed me a crumpled drawing. Stick figures. One tall, one short, holding hands under a sun with sunglasses. My name, misspelled but proudly written, at the bottom. You drew this for me? I asked. He nodded. Mom said you were sad, so I made it happy. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Tessa finally stepped forward. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. She looked older, softer, honest. I didn't tell him to run to you, she said. He just did. I looked at her. Does he know who his dad is? She hesitated. Not yet. I told him you were someone special. That's all he needed for now. We sat together for a long time after that, the 3 of us. Talking, laughing, watching him make up rules to a game no one else understood. Nolan wasn't there. He'd gone upstate for treatment. We hadn't spoken since that night. Maybe we never would again. And maybe that was okay. Forgiveness isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's just not letting the fire consume you. And as I watched that boy, the child born out of betrayal, confusion, and silence, I didn't see a mistake. I saw a beginning. I started visiting him on weekends. Then Wednesdays. Then Mondays. I started bringing snacks, then puzzles, then stories from when I was his age. He asked me questions no adult ever could. Do you like cheese? What's the farthest you've ever walked? If the moon fell down, would we have to share it? I answered all of them. And one day, he called me Dad. Tessa cried when she heard it. She apologized again that night, not for the past, but for the parts of it that still hurt. And for the first time, I told her it was okay. Because in the end, I didn't lose a wife. I found a son. And sometimes, that's more than enough.